Noah Mayers has been working in education for over 20 years. He was a teaching artist for 8 years in both public and charter schools in New York City, and then worked as a woodshop teacher at a private school for a year before launching Brooklyn Apple Academy in New York City in 2010. Located in the Park Slope neighborhood, Brooklyn Apple is a self-directed learning center for homeschoolers and unschoolers. It currently serves about 50 learners who attend part-time throughout the week. I wrote about Noah and Brooklyn Apple in my Unschooled book and had a chance to visit there again during my recent trip to see innovative microschools and learning models in New York City. Noah Mayers, welcome to the Liberated podcast.
Hi, glad to be here.
It's great to have you here. It was great to see you again in New York recently and visit Brooklyn Apple again after a few years of not being there since I wrote Unschooled. And lovely to see so much growth within the kind of self-directed learning community in New York City, especially over the past few years. And so I want to get into kind of why you created Brooklyn Apple and the progression of that over now more than a decade. But before we do, let's start with kind of your story and your pathway to education and alternative education. I remember you telling me when I interviewed you for the Unschooled book that your kind of first entry point into alternative education was the year you spent homeschooling as a child in Maine, where you grew up. And then that sort of maybe piqued your interest in other ways of learning and approaching education. So maybe you can start there, kind of what insights that provided and how that led to you then making a career out of education.
Yeah, I would say that homeschooling year definitely was an inflection point. It changed how I thought about school. I was able to homeschool with my best friend for my eighth grade year, and my parents and my friend's parents, they took turns teaching different subjects, and half the day our classroom would be here at actually the house that I'm in right now. I'm visiting my mom and my sister up in Maine, and the other half the time would be at my friend's house, which was a mile down the road. So we bike back and forth between classrooms or houses, and we went on field trips. We spent the first half the day in what would look like a more typical kind of learning environment. Like we were learning academics and sitting down at a desk across from our parent teacher, for the mornings, and then we would cook our own lunches and then work on independent projects in the afternoon. Um, so homeschooling can look radically different no matter how people do it in lots of different ways. But that's how we ended up doing it. And we went on lots of field trips through the year. We did a unit on immigration, and we went down to New York City and visited the Tenement Museum and the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, and we and a sweatshop. And for science, we visited the local concrete mine and factory and went rock hounding. For part of the spring, I built a trail through the woods, worked on a history comic book. So it was great. It was really wonderful. And then moving on, as I went to high school and college, I started to see those institutions as institutions that could serve my interests. And I think I was empowered to start asking administrators for space and time to do what I wanted to do. And I went to college. As I went to college, I got into education as a means of thinking about social change, and um, and I started working in schools as a teaching artist while I was in college as an intern, and worked in schools all over the. Wait, I think I'm jumping ahead.
No, that's great. So tell us about that experience. I know you said you were a teaching artist in both public and charter schools for about 8 years, and that involved kind of integrating academic subjects through art. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, so I worked for an organization called LEAP for a number of years, and so I would go into schools and teach um, language arts through theater, history through comics and games, um, and different art forms, printmaking, just a lot of different art forms and academic subjects. The whole, whatever the teachers needed, whatever the schools needed. And so for me, that was a great education in seeing a very wide swath of schools in New York City. I got to, I think I worked in probably over maybe 20 schools over those years. So I got to see kind of a wide range of what school was like in New York City. And, as I was coming to the end of my 30s and kind of thinking about what I might want to do more sustainably economically, because teaching artists are not paid that well. I started to think like, okay, how can I be a full-time teacher? Do I want to work within these schools, or can I work? Do I think I can have what it takes to put 20, 30 years into this path? Um, and I thought that maybe I didn't. that that maybe I saw some really wonderful teachers in some really hard situations where they were getting ground down, and um, I wanted to be able to teach and teach full time, but and teach in a way that where I felt that was sustainable, where I could be myself, where I could share what my strengths were, and so I was like, okay, the easiest way to do this is start my own school.
And did you know at that time that it would be a self-directed learning center? What was your thought at that point?
So yeah, it was a little bit of a path toward that. I had taught a class for a micro school called the Rad School, which is a school of, like a micro school of about 6, 7 kids, and 5 or 6 families. And I was like, oh, this seems simple. Let's start one of these. And this was before there weren't that many micro schools. It wasn't a word that was out there as much. And so that was my first thought. And I started teaching, offering classes to homeschool families, and putting the word out there that I wanted to start something. And I did end up finding a family that hosted us in their kind of palatial basement for the first couple of years. And yeah, and I think that model was a good model, but it wasn't. I think it was a difficult model for me at that point, because I didn't really have. I was still working on whatever my ideology was going to be. I was like, I just want to start something. I wasn't a part of a network or of a existing kind of set of ideologies that would kind of help structure it and bring it all together. So we eventually just transitioned into a homeschool resource center, which made a lot more sense.
And at the time, were you thinking about self-directed education as that ideology or the philosophy of education, or was it a more just kind of a general resource center for homeschoolers? I'd love to know kind of how you began to solidify your commitment to self-directed education.
Yeah, I think there was always the idea that even if we were offering a class, that the kids would have a lot of room within the class to self-direct. And then let's see, let me think. I think it's just kind of how, yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of how we progressed. I mean, the idea, I always felt that the strongest part of, of what my schooling had been was to, when I was interested in a topic, I could dive into it and, and spend countless hours doing it. And it was easy. It was just like walking or breathing. And then when doing something that I was like felt more coerced into doing, obviously just not very efficient. Like, it didn't, it doesn't work. It was like, yeah, hard to do. It's like, actually, the only class I ever failed was my homeschool. Was in my homeschool year, I failed my French class because I wasn't that interested in it, didn't want to do it. My friend was already like a couple years into French, and so that was
Mm.
my first and only failed class was in that homeschool year. Um, but yeah, I think that it's how we naturally progressed going forward. We had projects and some kind of offerings that teachers would bring to the table, but if the kids weren't into them, they didn't really go that far. Um, so went more and more into that self-directed area.
Yeah, and so when we think about self-directed education, we think about this interest-based, non-coercive learning environment where, young people may be exposed to different things or, invited to participate in various classes or lessons, but everything is optional and they always have the freedom to quit, to exit, and kind of providing that sort of equal treatment of young people the way we would treat, with respect, other adults. And we wouldn't sort of force an adult to participate in a class that they wouldn't want to participate in. We shouldn't do the same for children. And so
I think adults are in a lot of coercive environments.
yeah.
I think that's what I think that's one reason. I think that's part of school is just kind of getting one used to being in a coercive environment.
Mm,
I think most people, I think a large amount of people do not want to go in the morning to the place where they have to go.
really good point. I mean, I guess the larger kind of legal structure is that children are compelled under a legal threat of force to attend some kind of school or homeschool situation where adults are not legally compelled to be anywhere. They do have the freedom to quit. It's not easy, but they certainly, have more of that freedom and respect as adults than as
Yeah.
young people do, right? And so youth liberation is very much a part of kind of the self-directed education philosophy, and then hopefully provides that agency and autonomy that can carry people into adulthood, right? To
Mhm.
prevent that feeling of being trapped or being oppressed.
Yeah, I think if you have, I think if you experience that level of freedom as a child, I think you might come to expect it, or it'd be
Yeah,
harder. I know, like when you take homeschoolers or folks that have been in self-directed environments, and then we've had teachers come in from other environments, and it doesn't always not always a good match because the kids are like they're not used to being spoken to in certain ways, or treat treated in ways where they have less agency, or feel less empowered, and they're like, what is going what is
right,
going on? I mean,
right.
I obviously we want to be able to give kids like the skills to be able to code switch in ways that
Sure.
let them be in both environments. So like take from this what you can, and try to be like, try to let that let some of these things slide maybe. But yeah, no, I think kids come to expect a certain level of respect.
Yeah, that respect and that freedom. And you realize that, most of us that went to conventional schools, we were conditioned to being obedient and conforming to kind of these top down expectations. And then in adulthood, hopefully, we can de-school a bit and to reconnect with those natural interests and passions, and hopefully, regain a sense of personal autonomy and agency. And with self-directed education, we're just providing that opportunity to young people right out of the gate so that they don't have to go through that deconditioning process, and can really, chart their own course in life.
Mhm.
So Brooklyn Apple, started in 2010. You were in different locations, but you've been in your Park Slope location for a number of years. Beautiful, top floor location, very bright, lots of different kind of nooks and classrooms. You have a full kitchen. Um, you have, art supplies and studios. You have lots of games for the kids to play. Tell us a little bit about what a typical day and week is like at Brooklyn Apple, because you have kind of different groups of kids coming at different times, doing different things, again, all based around what they're interested in doing. So tell us what that looks like.
Yes, sure. We work with kids ages 4.5 through 18. Um, so we have different stuff going on for the teens. The teens have a flying squad on one day. They have a day where they work in our headquarters and work on projects. Their big project right now they're working on is every week they've been putting up a new episode of Brooklyn Apple News, which is kind of like it's a little like The Onion, or it's like a satirical news show that they've been working on every week. And then the teens also have a day that just started this year, which is like just a hangout day on Sunday. That's staffed by a teen. He's 18 now, and that's been really popular. There's about 15, 16 kids that come to that every week, to hang out, cook, play games, just like be real silly. And I'm super jealous of that group, because if I had a way to just see all of my friends every week, and I could go or not, that'd be great. So maybe I need to replicate that again for in my own life. Anyway, so and then yeah, so we have different groups going on different days. We have 3 field trip days. We've got an athletics day where kids meet out in the park and play sports. And then in our space, a typical day, the kids come in, they meet with staff and talk about what kind of projects they want to work on. In the beginning of the year, that's typically in one big group meeting. We go around the circle and we talk about what we want to work on. And by this time of the year, a lot of our groups are now kind of forgoing that, because everyone comes in and gets right to work. And while I think they miss some aspects of that meeting, I think a lot of the kids just really want to go in and get right to work. And by work, that's kids come in and be like, I want to do some beading. I want to work on arts projects. We have a lot of kids that really like to bake or make food, and then set up a little store outside of our space on Fifth Avenue, and run businesses. The kids are really interested in running businesses and making money. And conveniently, there are $2 stores located on both corners. So like they can instantly take that money they make and put it into toys and garbage. Sorry, garbage. That's I'm judging what they're buying. But yeah. So and we have a wood shop, so kids are working in the wood shop making things. Yeah, there's though I kind of talk about it as it's almost a 3-ring circus of different things going on. We have when it's really, when it's humming, there'll be someone in the kitchen baking something. There'll be kids in the art room working on an art project. There'll be kids in the library reading or working on some computer programming. In the main space, there'll be kids working on building a giant blanket fort. In the wood shop, there'll be another project going on there. So there's a lot of things going on, which is great. The only, I think, challenge for a space like ours is that means the student-teacher ratio is really low. That's a 4-to-1 student-teacher ratio, because there's so many things going on. Some of those things involve, tools that adults use, knives, mixers. Kids are working in the wood shop with drills and saws. So we can't. I think the economics of that is harder than when you have 20 kids in there, sitting down, learning from one adult. But it is, I think it is special and it is cool.
Yeah, and it's that real authentic work with the real tools of our culture that you're providing kind of a responsible opportunity for kids to do. And that's crucial. And I think you're right. It is a very special part of Brooklyn Apple and a lot of the self-directed learning centers I've visited as well. Noah, you mentioned Flying Squad. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, because some of my listeners and viewers may not be aware what that is. And that is another special organization.
Sure. So Flying Squad is something that's come out of the Brooklyn Apple community, and it's a staff member, Alex Coast, who started the first one here in Brooklyn. The idea with that was sorry, this little computer's making a little sound. The idea of flying squads is to it's a self-direct. It's simply put, it's kind of like a self-directed field trip day. Teens in our community, it's mostly teens, but we've had younger flying squads as well. They meet up in a public place. We meet up in the library, the Central Library of Brooklyn, and they, as a group, decide what they're gonna do today, that day, or where they're gonna go. So they have to use a lot of they have to develop and use a lot of skills for consensus decision making and democratic decision making. Because not like I think oftentimes they do have a vote and decide where they want to go, but if someone's been outvoted a number of times, after a few weeks they're like, okay, we'll go to that place you've been waiting for a while. So it's not so it's a mix of democratic decision making, of voting, and then also that consensus based of like trying to make sure that everyone gets what they need and what they want. And so there's those skills that are developed, although I don't think that's like the point. I think when the kids show up, they're like, I'm here to develop these skills. But I think learning how to work in groups is a super important skill. And it's a skill I do not think that it's really a prerequisite or something that we learn in school all the time, because a lot of the groups that we're in are very hierarchical and kind of top down. The decisions come from the top and kind of work their way down. So I think those are super important skills to learn. And then so they go out into the world, and sometimes that day could be going to IKEA and having a 2-hour game of hide and seek in the IKEA furniture department. So and that's pretty fun.
And there are now these flying squads around the country, really kind of prompted by the Brooklyn Apple community, but expanding elsewhere to enable young people to be immersed in their community during the day, kind of embedded in the community, get used to seeing young people out and about living their lives, as opposed to being kind of cloistered in a classroom, as so many kids are today.
Yeah, there's flying squads all over the country and a few around the world now. And we've gotten a Vela grant to help seed new flying squads. Thank you, Vela. And working on that. Yeah, I think one thing that I noticed early on with Brooklyn Apple, being on field trips and being out in the park with kids, is that the city really does become a kid desert during the school hours. Like, we go into the park or the playgrounds, and there's no kids. They're gone. They're all in school, which was always interesting to me. It comes in handy sometimes as a group of traveling kids, like going to certain cultural institutions. We're like, oh, they're empty. They're all ours. Or this playground's all ours. The parks, I've been noticing the parks there are a lot more kids in the parks these days, because the movement of outdoor education is definitely picking up a lot of steam. So when we first started, we didn't see many kids in the parks, and now we see many groups of yellow vested children out in the parks. I'm very impressed with their fortitude too. We've had days where we canceled school because it was a blizzard. There were blizzard-like conditions. And then after the snow and the wind died away, I would go into the park with my son to go sledding, and I would see that group leaving. I was like, you guys were here all morning in that blizzard? They're like, yeah. So
that's great. It's great that more and more young people are getting outside, and that forest school and outdoor education movement is gaining traction. And you've gained traction as well over the past, now over a decade of running Brooklyn Apple, gaining more and more students. You gained a lot more students sort of in the last 3 years of the COVID pandemic. More and more homeschool, or more and more families turning to homeschooling. I know you said some of those families have headed back to conventional schooling, but you're still at enrollment levels that are above kind of your pre-pandemic rates. I wonder what you see parents attracted to in homeschooling, unschooling, and Brooklyn Apple specifically. Why are they coming to you and adopting this educational philosophy right now?
Yeah, I think it's usually, there's a lot of different reasons. right? Why people homeschool. So I guess he can give you the top 10 or top five. Uh, One, sometimes the kids go on strike. They're like, I think one of my first students was there because he was not doing, he was just twiddling his thumbs all day. So he had gone on strike. He's like, I don't like this place. This is not working out for me, and I'm on strike. I'm leaving, or I'm not showing up. So something about the school is not working out for that kid. We have a lot of, we have kids that are not built for, they're not built for school. The school is not built for them. They need, like a lot of young kids that just, they need to be moving. They need to be moving their bodies. They need to be running around. They have energy. And that's perfectly appropriate for for humans and young humans. And schools do not, a lot of kids can kind of change who they are to kind of work within that system, within that space, and then some kids are not able to, or maybe they're being able to with medication. Right, so we have that. We have some parents that are homeschooling now, homeschooling in New York because of vaccine laws. I would say that's probably 25 to 30% of the secular homeschool world now.
Right,
Especially after
because New York several years ago got rid of religious exemptions,
Yeah.
as well as philosophical exemptions, which they had gotten rid of previously, and that led to an increase in homeschooling in the
and then
state.
there's right, there's the folks that homeschool for religious reasons. We don't see that group as much within our space, although we have. And then and then some folks are homeschooling. I think during the pandemic, obviously, people were homeschooling because they could make their own, like, because schools were big, big boxes filled with lots of people. And sorry, I think I lost the thread of this question.
Yeah, no, it's why people are coming to you. Why are they
Oh, yeah, why people are
choosing
coming? Yeah, and then
using
I think,
that? Yeah.
and then there's some people for ideological reasons, but like I don't like school. I don't think it's going to work for my family. I want to make my. I think we can do something. I think we can create something better. I think that's my and as a kind of interruption of something going on. Like if you have a child that's just facing a lot of social anxiety, because junior high is intense, or they're seeing behaviors arising in their kids because of social anxiety, or because of the situation they're in.
Mm.
They'll kind of interrupt those by homeschooling. I think that's what happened with my own homeschooling path. And I think homeschooling is a great choice for folks. You don't have to homeschool for the whole way through, although great if you do, fine. But it can be a great option for a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever you need, to kind of pop out and create your own wonderful learning situation where you can develop some confidence and some sense of self, and discover the world, go on field trips. There's here in New York City, there are a lot of options for homeschoolers in all different age groups. There are different places to go take classes, or you always have all the after school options as well. And then what I'm really excited about is when I see teens homeschooling and taking all that time and turning it into hours into turning it into things that they're really excited about, and becoming professionals in various different trades and crafts. So by the time that they're 18, I feel like they've developed a ton of confidence in their ability to be adults in the world. Be like, oh, I can pay my bills because I am already a semi-pro special effects makeup artist, because I just put the last 4 years into honing my craft. Or I have other students that are now professional video editors and stuff like that. So I think allowing kids to start to have that time to start, especially as teens, starting to get put all those hours into into those crafts is really, I find that really exciting, and I'm kind of, um, yeah, I'm really, or sometimes jealous of the amount of confidence that they have at that age. I'm like,
Mm,
wow,
yeah.
you're like, or looking out into the world, and it's a place that you're already feeling like, oh yeah, I can do that.
Ah, this must be so rewarding for you as an educator, seeing that too. So Noah, if some of my viewers or listeners are thinking about being an education entrepreneur like you, maybe they are currently working in public and private schools like you were, or they just have that desire to launch something new and different. What advice would you have for someone who wants to create a learning center or micro school or some other kind of alternative education model?
Um, I think some of my advice, some of it might be out of date, because when I first started, it was a different landscape. It was a more, it was smaller and less going on. I feel like now there's a lot, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people starting projects, and then I feel there are other states. I don't know much about what's going on in the rest of the world. There's other states as much as I do locally. I know in other states you can start to get public money to do projects. And I think if you have access to that, I think your path forward is much simpler. Possibly, I don't know. I'm not there. I would say like Brooklyn Apple is, but it's a a lot of ups and downs, and you'll have to learn how to be a business person.
Right?
You'll have to
Yeah.
have a business sense, and be a business person, or have other partners that can do that. And over the years, I've found people that have I've been able to work with, and start to have administrators who to work with, and who like spreadsheets. There are people that love spreadsheets and love making spreadsheets and creating order from chaos. And that, those weren't my skills. I was a I think I'm an okay teacher. Like, I have those skills. So either develop some business skills of your own to get ready to do some business, or find other people that are going to work with you on doing that. Because that's, I mean, obviously the word entrepreneur is what in the description. But I think, but it's maybe not what we already know how to do well. I think there's a lot of things a lot of skills and people that could have helped me early on that I didn't have, and that made things harder.
Mm. So
Um,
what so what do you think the future looks like, Noah, for Brooklyn Apple over the next, say, 5 to 10 years? What is your sense of where things go, both for you as an organization and maybe alternative education, self-directed education in the city as a whole?
the future. I don't really think about the future that much. I'm mainly, I'm pretty ensconced in the present. I'm not, um, when I think about Brooklyn Apple, I don't seek to expand and start other branches, because for me that's more administration in my life, and I didn't get into this to be an administrator. I'm administrating a lot more than I used to. I teach 2 to 3 days a week now, and an administrator other two. But you know, yeah, I have no idea where the future is. I have a lot of anxieties about the future in general, and always have. That's always been kind of like where my name is Noah, so it's kind of an apocalyptic story. So I've always kind of yeah. So maybe we shouldn't start talking about the future.
Well, I sense that the future is bright for alternative education, for micro schools, for education
Growing.
entrepreneurship. And it does seem like more and more people are interested in non-coercive self-directed education, which will, I think, have a huge positive impact on the future generation. So, Noah, if my listeners and viewers want to connect with you, learn more about Brooklyn Apple Academy, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can. There's a contact form on the website. You can reach out. I'm very available. People email me all the time and ask if they can talk, and I just talk to them on the phone. So very happy to talk to people. I had mentors along the way who helped me out. shout out to Brightworks and Gaber Tully out there. He's one of that project is really cool. So yeah, happy to share what I've learned along the way. And yeah, good luck to all people starting new projects. I feel very lucky as an educator that I get to do what that I'm on this path. I've yeah, when I look back at the last stretch of years, I've been able to. It's a lot of fun.
Mm.
There have been days where you're on a field trip, and I'm at the beach in the water. Other kids are like having a great time, like swimming, and I'm like, okay, like I'm one of that if there are 100,000 teachers right now in New York City, I'm the only one doing doing this right now. It feels very lucky. So yeah, it's I'm happy to be on this path.
Lucky indeed. And the website is brooklynappleacademy.org. Noah
Mhm.
Mangers, thank you again for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you. Thanks. Lovely to be on here.